Together as one, we get it done.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. I've got a fantastic guest here for you tonight, and I've got some great news to talk about, which, of course, is great every week to hear some new news. So I'm looking forward to this. I hope you are too. I hope you enjoy the chat. Make sure you get in there and ask us some questions throughout. My name is Chris. You are watching the Writing Community Chat Show. So hello to you all in the chat there. Linda, hello, nice to see you, and Brandon as well, and whoever else is in there if you're the first time viewing. Thank you for doing so. And of course, you can listen back to this on any podcast platform. And of course, you can watch this back on YouTube at any time if you like to. Again, this is live and we are accepting questions throughout the show. And at the end, there is a designated section for you to drop those questions in. So please do so for myself or for my guest tonight. And there will be lots of things to talk about, I am sure. So let's get on with a bit of news first, because there are a few things happening in the world of the WCCS right now. And the first thing to mention is the Indie Takeover. And that is something that, if you haven't heard, is something I started last month. And we run polls throughout the whole month of June, not quite in July yet, to identify an indie author that we can then support through the month of July. And hopefully send a lot of engagement their way, buy their books potentially and review them if we can, and really support that author as best as we can as a community. And now that decision has been made and the polls have been collected, the figures have been collected, and our winner with 21 votes more than our second place, who in second place was Lalai Love. Unfortunately, our community member didn't get there. So 21 votes ahead of Lalai, which is fantastic, is A.S.E.A. With her book series. So she's got 7 books in that series. It's fantastic. And it really is something impressive what she's doing with her Patreon and all those sorts of good things. You can check out now, I'll show you on screen, the writingcommunitychatshow.com website. And under the Indie Takeover section, there is now all of her information. This is still a work in progress, so bear with it. But you can find a Twitter, a Facebook, a BookBub, and all of her links there. And you'll find a bit about her. Really awkwardly placed advert there from Wix, so I will move that. A little bit of a bio, all about her, her wonderful book series, her writing career, and her milestones in that career, which that is going to be continued when I finish that. Her books are there. There's a wonderful little trailer for her series as well. There's the blurb for her latest book. In fact, we're going to go with book 1 for this, because obviously in the series, we want to get straight to it and read book 1. And there it is, a bit of a reminder about the community effort and being part of that together. Our motto, of course, the WCCS, together as one. So that's really cool. Congratulations to you for being our first Indie Takeover. I was going to say victim there. That's a very strange word to use, I think. Not victim, but winner. So congratulations and thank you for entering. And let's get you all the support we can get you. And hopefully that means that we'll get a lot of... it may even up your analytics or something like that really helps you in your career. Linda says, such an excellent idea. Thank you, Linda. Love supporting the community. That's what this show is all about. So let's hopefully get that going. More news in my life. Some of you know I've been doing a teaching degree in college for the past year, a 2-year course, and I just get my results in today. First year, I got a distinction. I'm very happy with that because, let's be honest, in school I was a bit rubbish. So it's nice to see me actually getting past that milestone with a bit of good, a decent grade, I think. A distinction, it pretty much doesn't get much better than that for me. So I'm very happy with that. And I'm going to try my best not to ramble on. And I'm going to get tonight's guest on because there's going to be a lot of stories in here. We're going to hear about writing. We're going to hear about many different wonderful things. So let me introduce tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is an author. Of course, we love speaking about books and writing. A film producer. And again, we love stories. So film is fantastic. And an underwater photographer. I'm not sure I've ever spoken to an underwater photographer before, and I'm going to enjoy doing this tonight. She began her career as Thailand's youngest English writing author of 3 best-selling novels, which is incredible to think about, and sold those in multiple languages, which is, again, I couldn't even think of that as an author right now, selling in multiple languages. I'm just trying to focus in England. I'm struggling with that. She has spoken at TEDx events and international book fairs and was shortlisted for the S.E.A. Writers, ASEAN not sure how to pronounce that, Young Writers Award, and juggles for film and writing competitions. Judges for film and writing competitions at USC, UCLA, and the Neilson Hays Library. There's so many things that we could talk about in this, and I'm sure we're going to get sidetracked with something, but I'm very excited about that. And she's an advocate for solo female travel, which we're going to talk about. We can't not. And she's visited over 90 countries across 7 continents. I'm very unwell traveled, so this is going to be amazing for me to hear. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show Pier Nirandara. Sorry for that. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's lovely to be here.
Stumbling my words everywhere there. How are you doing? I hope you're well.
I'm doing very, very well. Very excited to be on here and to chat all things books, stories, traveling. I mean, you basically named all of my passions right there.
Well, that's the one thing I have definitely picked up looking at your website and all your information in your bio. Your passions are something that exceed what I could dream of, and the amount of things that you've done and are doing and have done and created as well is just really impressive. So I want to thank you for being here, and of course I'd love to get into as much of that as possible. So I'm not sure how we're going to squeeze a lot of that into this hour, but
yeah, very eclectic interests, and so happy to talk and kind of meander, go wherever the conversation takes us.
Yeah, that's what we love indeed. So where in the world are you right now? Because obviously you travel everywhere, and you have multiple locations that you work from. So whereabouts are you?
Yeah, I'm currently in Los Angeles, sunny LA, kind of a Groundhog Day situation where every day looks the same. But I spend a lot of the past year across, just kind of traveling around, doing research for my next book and collecting stories, essentially.
Fantastic. And there's a lovely book collection behind you as well. There's a nice bookshelf.
Thank you. This is what I call my pleasure reading shelf, which is just like
Nice.
Personal literature that I enjoy, versus I have another bookshelf that's for work. Back when I was a book to film representative at ICM Partners, where we sold book to film rights, and so I had to read a lot for work and for producing as well, and that's like my kind of more work oriented shelf.
I love that idea. You get a pleasure shelf and a work shelf, but
yeah, sometimes the lines definitely get blended, where like you read something for work and then you're like, oh wow, this is going on the pleasure reading shelf for sure.
So how do you spend more time on the pleasure shelf or on the work shelf?
It depends. Currently I would say now it's more the pleasure reading shelf, just because of the work that I'm doing, and a lot of it is, it's so crazy. I bought a very obscure like South African literature book yesterday that well, I was joking to my partner. I was like, I can't believe I'm buying books now that we would have read in school. Like, it's like a textbook, and I would have complained about reading this in school, and yet now I'm doing it for pleasure reading.
It's incredible. That is in the UK, it's very similar. You always get the same book thrown at people year after year, and you always think, why the hell do people read that in school? And then it is funny to look back on that and think, actually, you can see why that happens then.
Yeah, and I actually went to a British international school growing up in Bangkok, and so a lot of our curriculum, like we did the IGCSEs and then the IB, read a lot of English literature as well as global literature. But yeah, it definitely brings me back.
Fantastic. And of course, would you know what the last book you added to your pleasure shelf was, or was that the one you just spoke about?
Oh my God. I'm a little bit of a nibbler. I'm not one of those people who like reads one book and reads it like the entire way. I'm constantly reading about 5 to 10 books at a time, which is I don't know if that's even kosher to say in the literary community. I feel like a lot of people frown upon that, but depends on like my mood. Sometimes like I love things. I just have a very eclectic taste. So like, it'll go from something that's lighter and more fun and young, and then, or it'll span to something much darker. Like, I don't necessarily want to read something super depressing before bed all the time, so it really depends. But something I read recently that I'm obsessed with is Susan Cain's book, Bittersweet. She's very known for her book, Quiet, which is all about introversion, which I am not, but Bittersweet is just all about like essentially the feelings of longing, bittersweetness, transience in the world, and how do you convert that into creativity, and how do you live with that longing, which I thought was a very beautiful theme.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I think people do have, I don't think you'd be judged for reading multiple books. I think that is something a lot of people do. And I think one of the other things is what people do. There you go. Brandon says in the chat, I'm a total nibbler. So,
Oh, yes. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. And I see Linda saying Nibblers United. I love this.
yeah, I didn't see that yet. Nibblers United. So, yeah, I think it really depends. And one of the biggest things as well is having the massive TBR list. And I think so many people who are readers, that list is enormous. I know mine is, and I've got on a ebook downloads, and I've got books sat on the shelf. People have even sent in, and I just haven't got around to it. And that's a difficult thing. Do you have a lot that you haven't read yet?
I have so much. My Goodreads is like constantly, I feel like it's almost like traveling. The more you do it, the more the list grows. Like the more places I go to, I'm like, oh, I'm crossing these countries off the list. And then I'm like, but this country is amazing. I want to come back. And there's so much more
Mm,
of the country I haven't seen yet. And it just is, it's a never ending list. And I think I'm just kind of having to make peace with that.
wow. I mean, I'm guessing that from just that phrase there, that your love for travel is to do with seeing the country and the culture and all those sorts of things. So is there time for you to read on that, or is it strictly I'm taking all this
Yeah,
information
it's
in?
interesting. It's really fascinating. So travel writing is something that I'm very passionate about and just like very near and dear to heart. And I believe it was I think it was Pico Iyer who talked about this, and he's one of my favorites. Is he says you actually need stillness like
Mm,
after the trip to process and sit. And as a travel writer, people constantly think that you're always on the move, you're always on the road. Like there's this perception that you're constantly moving, and I don't think that's true. I think that we move quite a lot, but then afterwards, either you're moving, but you're slow traveling. So you
mm,
are on the road, but it's not like you're go, 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 because you need those slower moments and those quiet moments to really reflect on your journey and,
mm.
kind of distill down what you're going through. So yeah, I mean, I travel quite a fair bit for my work, but I also really, really, really value time to sit still, which is what I'm doing now in LA.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of us could incorporate a lot more, is having that time to sit there and actually slow down and realize what's going on. Some of it, so
Yeah,
many of us
modern
just
life is
fly through
not
life.
very
Yeah.
conducive to that.
Wow, it really isn't. So I think travel writing must play a big part in how you write, and sort of the information that you then feed into that work as well. Is that the case? And has that always been the case, or did you start writing before your travels began, if that makes sense?
Yes, I was very fortunate to kind of travel from a young age. My family put a lot of emphasis into traveling, going to international school. I grew up in Bangkok, Thailand. So it was very multicultural. Always had kind of that view that the world was not just Bangkok, like
Hmm.
there were things outside. And then I actually got my career started writing books, like children's books. So they were
Yeah.
fantasy books, they were set in these magical lands that I'd created, but it was strange because there was always an essence of travel in them. And even though these lands were made up, they were pulled from a lot of real places I'd been to and kind of a mesh of them put together. So I think even before consciously recognizing it, travel's always played a part. And I think Rebecca Solnit has this amazing quote that she talks about how stories are geography, and like the essence of storytelling is linked to like empathy and geography and relating the two, which I had never put together in my mind
Yeah.
before. But I thought it was such a poetic way to explain the link between writing and the link between travel.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. I like that. And I mentioned at the start of this, I'm so untraveled. It's crazy to think that you've traveled across, I think it was 90 countries ish or
Yeah,
plus.
90 or so. Yeah.
That's amazing. And there must be some standout moments within that, but it must be so hard as well with that amount of travel to then narrow something down. But has there been something for you that you just kind of blew your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there've been a lot of moments where you kind of take a step back and you can't really believe this is real life, whether it's good or bad. I've
Yeah.
had a lot of misadventures as well, especially as a solo female traveler. That's definitely
Yeah.
a path we can go down. But I would say that I keep going back to South Africa. It's like one of
Mm,
my favorite places in terms of it's naturally stunning, and there's like the classic tourist trip you could do, but it's also so rich in history, diversity, culture. There's a
yeah.
lot of like tragic history there too.
Mm,
And I think that a lot of people have a very monolithic view of Africa. They see it as one kind of Africa just as one thing, the way that like they think of Thailand and they see either the hangover or it's just like one thing. And I've always been fascinated with exploring different subcultures and the diversity within a space. So I keep going back to South Africa. It's definitely very close and near and dear to my heart. But yeah, I mean, the world is so, so wide, and there's like my list of places to go to is always growing.
Wow. And so there's still a whole list there to go to?
Yes. Yes, there's at the top of the list right now, I'm really itching to do Western Africa.
Okay.
So I'm trying to plan a trip to Senegal, Mauritania, the Gambia. Like there's a bunch of them there that I'm just very curious about. And I haven't hit that part of Africa yet at all.
That is fantastic. It's amazing. And from what I've seen, that you do obviously a lot of diving and various things like surfing and really get into sort of the environment. But is it mainly sort of backpacking is what you've done?
Yeah, I've done
Mm,
different kinds of trips. My personal favorite probably are backpacking trips because there's a certain just like freedom to that. You're not constrained by a rigid itinerary. You can kind of
yeah.
allow yourself to go and where to wander essentially, right? And to really soak in where the days get almost like you don't really know what day it is anymore. And there's a certain magic to that versus an organized trip of like, we're doing 2 weeks here and you're like
Mm,
hopping hotels every 2 days. So those are my personal favorite kinds of trips. I do a lot of diving expeditions. So I just got
yeah.
back from Mexico, where I was leading a diving expedition with the mobula rays, which are these migrating rays that come through that are huge, like thousands of them hanging out there. And we get to swim with them, bring guests,
Mm.
and then I'm leading a trip to French Polynesia later this year to go swim with the humpback whales, which is really exciting.
That is incredible. I did see the photo of the rays, and it was actually I shared it on the thing on social media, and I was just looking at that photo for ages. And another one of you diving, just it's just an entirely different world. And I've never dived, so for me, I'm just looking at that, thinking it's like outer space. It may as well be for me. Um,
Yeah, we compare it a lot to actually like I obviously have not been to
mm,
space, but
yeah,
the the notion of like you feel like you're floating and you're exploring this other world. It is very alien in a way, but the underwater world is magnificent. It's also very quiet down there. You know, your buddy can't
mm,
talk to you. It's really great.
wow, yeah. All the pressure's off the knees. Brandon said diving is so much fun. So I know Anya, who normally watches the show, she's away tonight. She also dives. So there's quite a few people that has dabbled in the sea diving.
Cool.
Um, is it free diving you do, or is it often oxygen
So
tanked?
both. I was a scuba diver for about a decade before I got into free diving, and then it
Okay.
completely blew my mind because with free diving, you don't sound like Darth Vader underwater, so you get
Yeah.
much closer to the animals, which is I dive a lot for animal interactions, and it's just different. They call it free diving for a reason. A, it's cheaper because you don't have so much equipment,
Yeah,
and
of
B,
course.
it's freer because you don't have the equipment. So I really enjoy that, but scuba diving for certain animals is still the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, what engagement have you had with animals, and has that ever gone a bit sideways?
Yeah, so the reason I started actually diving was
Mm,
because of the first books that I was writing. They were about mermaids and the underwater world and a
yeah.
fantasy land. But because I basically wanted to do research and I wanted to be able to write authentically about the underwater world. So that's the reason I got certified in Thailand when I think I was like 14 or 15. And it just completely blew my mind and got very, very hooked. So
Wow.
I would say that even though now they seem kind of different in terms of the writing and the diving, it all came from the same origin story, I guess, of
Mm.
wanting to tell stories and transport people to other worlds, which is really cool that I get to do that now, both from a writing perspective and also taking people diving and then bringing them to that world.
That's a wonderful way to look at that, is in taking those worlds and world building in both those sort of scenarios. Linda says, I love I've loved the idea of diving but terrified of sharks. And of course, I'm sure you've interacted with sharks. I'm sure I've read that somewhere. And I've been scuba diving in Thailand, Bali, and Turkey. So yeah, there's quite an experience there as well.
That's awesome. I grew up diving Thailand and have dived in Bali, but I've never dived in Turkey, actually. That would be super cool. And would happy to talk about sharks anytime. I mean, people often ask, like, oh, are you ever scared of sharks? Or I
Mm,
actually was terrified of sharks. And I actually am like naturally quite a nervous person. I'm not like just like they're like, oh, you travel. This is all these things that I did was to face those fears and to try to conquer them. So even now when I'm with a shark in the water, I get that the natural instinct of like the Jaws theme song, or the like, I should not be here in the water with this creature, until you actually process it and you realize that they generally don't really care about you. B, you're not really on their menu. C, like, it's a kind of shark that has never attacked people, or whatever it is. So there are ways to rationalize your mind around that, but I completely understand the instinct to just be like, yeah, shark, any kind of shark, no.
Amazing. That really is incredible. And I think a lot of people would generally hide from their fears, or not generally go towards them. So it's a really nice way to look at things. And I'm going to do this because it is a fear and I want to challenge myself in that way. So I really appreciate that. I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I think there's a certain, cliched adage that talks about how growth comes from discomfort and you should face your fears, et cetera, et cetera. But there is definitely some truth to that, right? Like, we don't grow from sitting in the comfort zone. We grow by challenging ourselves in whatever way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be a physical fear of swimming with sharks. It could be a fear of being alone, a fear of being in love, a fear of all these different things. So I definitely try to challenge myself to go towards those fears.
Okay, so let's have a think about the writing, because normally this show is in 3 parts and I've completely ignored part 1. So let's rewind it a little bit. Where did writing then become a bit of an inspiration for you? Kind of what stage of life was that for you? Because obviously I mentioned that the youngest English writing writer in Thailand, I think.
Yes. So I would like to say that I've always been writing. I think the first time I ever tried to write a book, I was about 7 or 8. It was very bad, and on a Word document, it was great. But it was also actually about mermaids. The writing, I think storytelling has always been a part of my life. I grew up as the only child living in this huge city that, can sound fun from an outsider's perspective, but growing up there, it was actually quite lonely. I was always at home by myself after school, didn't really have siblings, or didn't live close enough to my friends to go hang out at their houses. So I would just be by myself with my books. And I was very fortunate in the sense that my family basically had a no allowance method in terms of books. So I could go into the library and buy and get anything that I wanted in the bookstore. It was like the one place that they would just go and drop me off, and I would just hang out there for the entire day. And yeah, that really, really sparked a love for and a curiosity for the written word, for communicating, for connecting with people. And at its essence, the way it started was I wanted, that feeling you get when you read a book that just kind of like seeps into your soul or your blood, and you just feel like, oh my God, there's someone who understands what I'm going through, or holy shit, they've inspired something with me or sparked this like part of my soul. And I wanted to impart that feeling onto someone else, especially for other Thai kids, where back then the young adult literature that was around, children's books, was very, very Eurocentric and very white. And I never had characters that looked like me, reflected my upbringing, or any of that at all, which is kind of what inspired me to write a trilogy of fantasy novels. Because in fantasy, and in sci-fi, you can often get away more with like diverse characters, at least in the past. Now it's in to have like a diverse character, but back then I was very nervous about writing about a Thai girl or a Thai character, so it allowed me to kind of do that.
I was going to ask, did you feel a pressure having that sort of title as the English writer in Thailand at the time, or were you even aware of that then?
I didn't realize that when I was writing it. It was only when the book sold to the publishers, and the publishers started marketing the living hell out of it. Like, I was not expecting that. It was like this huge press tour. We had our first book launch at the biggest aquarium in Southeast Asia at the time, and we had people dressed as mermaids swimming down to the fish tanks, and it was crazy. And it was a huge privilege and a huge honor to have, because when the books first came out initially, people actually thought they were ghostwritten. Like, wow. I had a lot of, because back then it wasn't as common as it is now to be fluent in English if you're Thai. Now it's a little bit more ubiquitous, and like people are just like going to international school, and you have the internet, etc., and they grow up speaking English. But back then it wasn't as common. So there were a lot of like critics who thought that they were like, these are definitely ghostwritten. There's no way this 15-year-old girl could have written them. And I was at first very like offended, until I realized it was super flattering that they even thought they could have been ghostwritten.
Yeah, I guess that is a sideways compliment, the fact that they assumed it was too good to be true.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and the books are definitely they aged up with like both the
mm,
characters and the writing and my audience. So it was really cool. The first ones came out when I was 15, then 17, then I think maybe like 20. So
yeah,
my audience and the characters grew up alongside me.
that is incredible. And to be releasing a book at that age, was there kind of, did your parents have kind of a guiding hand when it came to being published? Was there any sort of talk there, or was it just like, let's go for this?
They were very supportive
Mm,
emotionally. I think most parents, when their kids say they want to write a book, they either dismiss them or they're like, "No, you're gonna study." Uh, but I remember the first thing my mom said to me when I told her way early on, I was like 13 when I said I was gonna write this
mm,
book. She said, "Sure, but if you put your mind to it, like you should finish it. Like there's a lot of people start things, they never finish them. We all,
wow.
I'm sure most of us can relate to starting a book and not finishing a book, right?"
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and I just was very stubborn in that way, I guess. I actually finished the first one and then it grew into a trilogy. So they were very, very supportive, but they had no idea about the publishing world. That's not what they're in. So it was just kind of navigating that blind in Thailand.
It is amazing, and the fact that you've had mermaids swimming for your launch was fantastic. That is some brilliant marketing.
Yeah, yeah, I got very lucky with the publishers I had in Thailand, who they are the
Mm,
biggest children's books publishers. So they do all the Harry Potter series,
wow.
like any kind of like young adult children's fantasy, that's their bread and butter. So they knew the market very, very well. And we did school tours and talked to kids about literature and the importance of writing and stories. Back then, there was a statistic in Thailand that Thais on average read 5 lines per year,
Wow.
which was, yeah, I mean, a huge issue. There's a huge issue of literacy there as well. So yeah, we were doing a lot of press that wasn't just about selling books, but it was about uplifting literature and having people actually value literature and value books, because books there are not, they're like a luxury item,
Mm,
because they're actually like, for in terms of the conversion rate of how much they cost, like a lot of people don't have the money and the resources to buy books.
okay. That's it. That's very interesting. I mean, did you feel almost like you had a part in changing the way that that was, the culture of how reading was at that age?
I don't know if I could particularly point to like
Yeah.
myself. I think it was just something that was happening in the space. And I think people were realizing that to learn English, to read, like they were starting to value that a lot more. Like UNESCO had this campaign
Mm,
with Bangkok, Bangkok Met, to make Bangkok the next world book capital. So we were
okay.
really involved in that. But it is, I would say, supremely heartwarming when I meet readers nowadays who, or Thai adults who
Yeah.
were kids back then, and we talk, and after some point in the conversation, they pause and they're like, "Wait, were you that mermaid girl? Because I read your books as a kid." And like, or to hear from even people nowadays who reach out and say, "You got me into reading or writing." It's
Yeah.
really, really heartwarming and cool to hear that.
I mean, most of us as authors kind of want to change someone's opinion or have an influence on them at some stage, but to do it at that age, I think is a real crucial time to intervene. And I've always talked about how if someone isn't really a reader and they catch them at that age, it'll change their reading
I
sort of
completely
desire.
agree. I think everyone is a reader. It's about
Mm,
finding the right books for them, right? And there's always been this snobbery, I think, in in the reading world, where it's like you have to, or in education, like you have to read these kinds of books.
yeah.
Oh, if you don't enjoy Lord of the Flies, you're not a reader. No, like there's so many different kinds of books that people are allowed to read. And I always say to the kids that I speak to that it, everyone is a reader. It's just finding the right book that speaks to you. Like, you might like, like really bad romance books. That's completely fine.
Mm.
Or you might like highbrow philosophical literature. Like there's so many things out there.
That's the thing. I think the industry has changed so much over the past few years or the past decades that traditional publishing sometimes used to feel that you had to publish things certain times of year and certain styles and things like that. And these days, I think it's a free for all where you have people that will read anything at any time of the year. You know, horror in the middle of the summer, it doesn't have to be in October. And those sorts of things. So I think self-publishing in that respect is definitely unlocked a lot of that potential. Um,
Yeah, it's really crazy how much that space has grown. When I
yeah.
was working at ICM Partners and representing book to film, like we had a lot of self-published projects come through that just
Mm,
blew up numerically and then caught the attention of actual legitimate publishers.
yeah.
So yeah, I think people, or even fan fiction. Like I used to write fan fiction as a kid, and it's really what allows you to, I don't know, like kind of like brush up on your skills or
Mm,
test the waters in a way that where it's very low risk, and then see what sparks with an audience. So I remember writing fan fiction when I was a young teen.
it's incredible. I mean, if we can talk about book to film very quickly, how is that process generally sort of looked into from your side, or that industry side of things, if someone is then trying to submit a book to you?
Yeah, so the backstory is that, so I was, children's book author in
Mm,
Thailand, moved to the US for university, and then after university wound up working at in the film industry in LA. So was originally going to work in publishing. That was a dream, but found
mm,
myself in the film in LA, and just actually really, really loved it and enjoyed the movie business. So I worked primarily at ICM Partners selling book to film rights, then was working at Sony Columbia Pictures, the studio, as an executive there, and then went over to production company focused on Asian American content. So I love storytelling in all shapes and forms, and it was really cool to work in a way where I was representing authors and their rights and kind of being on the flip side of things and getting to tell their stories for a while. The way that it's changed a lot as well, book to film. The streamers definitely
mm.
shook things up quite a bit, and the numbers that you start to see a lot more authors writing screenplays and a lot of
Yeah.
more authors producing and actually getting credit. You see things like Reese Witherspoon's book club that can blow up a book overnight, and a debut author can just go from like no one to someone, and just be, like, that's really cool. And the power of, even like there's an article about TikTok and
Yeah.
books, which I feel like I'm a little older than the TikTok generation. I don't
I wouldn't say that.
particularly
I think
understand that space.
we are seeing it in the world. Book Talk, for example, there are so many people now in that sort of little genre. It's not
It's
even little.
crazy
I'm
how
saying
it's
little.
blown
It's
up and
massive.
how books
Yeah.
can, yeah, yeah. So there's that whole space. But it just, at the end of the day, it's also just about the stories that connect. I also did a lot
Mm,
of focus on foreign and international books, which was really cool. Like going to the Frankfurt Book Fair and getting to, which was a dream of mine as a young author, but getting to go for work for Sony was
wow.
incredible. And to look at foreign book rights that made sense for adaptation for film, actually.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So have you got any tips then for possibly for someone who wants to then turn their author work into a screenplay and submit it?
Yeah. You mean turn it themselves, like adapt it
Yeah,
themselves?
possibly, or anyone just wanting to submit anyway.
Yeah, I think, I mean, having representation is always going to be your best bet in terms of cutting through and getting
Mm,
your work to who it needs to go to.
yeah.
Being like, luckily at ICM, they had a built-in publishing department. So all the books that they were representing on the publishing side would immediately get funneled to the book to film side. And then we would handle those rights amongst other rights as well. I would say that, I mean, there are trends that you can kind of spot, but at the end of the
Mm,
day, it's also writing about what you're passionate about, right? Like if you're just clobbering together a story that's hot or in the moment, who knows if it's going to be hot in a year or
yeah.
two. And I would say that it's perhaps better to write with the goal of publishing in mind, and anything
Mm,
else is a bonus and is kind of ancillary. It's like extra brownie points, if it happens to sell for book to film. But it's very difficult to write with the notion of, I want to make this into a movie and I also demand myself to be attached. A lot of the times it helps to be open to the conversation, but
mm.
not be like, I need to be the one to adapt this.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Brilliant. So let's have a little move on to part two of the show, because part one was a complete I missed it basically, and that was all of the shops. So we will talk about your books in your little series a bit more, and of course I know you are working on something at the moment, so we'll have a little chat about that. But let me play the video because I forgot video one. So here we go. Part two of the show, The Road to Writing. Two is not The Road to Writing. Part two is What's the Story. So there you go. I'm completely all over the shop today. Apologies. Okay, so let's talk about your book series a little bit. If you could let people know what that's about, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you are now doing, which is working on something new for yourself.
Yeah, so the original story or the trilogy that I'm best known for is called the Intraspecies Trilogy. And it's the first one's called The Mermaid Apprentices, followed by The Nymph Treasury and The Elven Ambassador. And tonally, I would say it's the classic young kids going on an adventure in a fantasy land. But ultimately, it's about two teenagers who get chosen to become mermaid ambassadors, or future mermaid ambassadors between the merfolk and the human race. And you find out that within our world, there's a parallel universe where all these mythical creatures exist, and every single mythical creature has an ambassador to keep the peace between them and the human race, essentially, so war doesn't break out. And it's an allegory for, xenophobia, immigration, like all of these actually like much darker and more adult themes that kind of have been incepted into it. Because, for example, the mermaids and the elves hate each other, and there's a long drawn history between the two races, when in reality, if you distill it down, we're all kind of the same. So these two teenagers have been chosen, and they go to this academy. They're training to become ambassadors, and they're doing all these missions and crazy adventures within this magical realm, essentially.
Incredible. I mean, that obviously was something you wrote as a very young person and developed as you got older. I mean, would you look back on that now and think you'd like to add things to that series, or are you happy that that's finished where it is?
There's always a way for you, like the comment we always make about the story's never done, right? You can edit something a gajillion times. So comes a point when I think we have to be okay stepping away from it. I'm very happy with where the series ended up. The books definitely get better as they progress because I got older and my writing developed. They recently actually got optioned for a TV series, and I was looking at the deck that the producers put together, and it was very, very cool because they took it in different directions that I'd never thought of. And I'm not precious about my material. I know a lot of authors don't like, there's certain authors that actually don't even want their books to be adapted at all. I'm very open to that. And I'm like, take it and see what happens. If someone wants to write fan fiction on it, go ahead. So yeah, it definitely, I would do certain things differently, but I think overall there's a certain innocence and a purity to the way they were written because it captured what a 15-year-old would have written.
Yeah. I do love the idea of going to get your book, not going to get it optioned, but having your book optioned. And I don't see why people would object unless they'd come back to you and said, all right, we're going to change the ending completely to something you don't like or agree with. And I think I'd be stuck at that point if they were to say, look, we're going to make a series or a film out of this, but the ending, we don't like it, we're changing it. And if I didn't agree with that at the time, would I still proceed or not? I think I would, but
I think it's a very personal thing too. For some, writing is not the same for everyone. And we worked with a few authors that for them, it was just non-negotiable. They didn't want their books adapted. And for others, they were like, yeah, I'm open to it depending on the company. But the thing is too, as an author, once your books get optioned, unless you're kind of a big author, unless they're giving you a lot of power, it's up to the producers and the studio, and you kind of have to cede control in that way. And as authors, a lot of us are control freaks, so it's definitely recalibrating the brain for that.
Amazing. So you are working on something for yourself now in terms of writing. Can you explain what that is or give us some detail?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on my first adult book, which to non-publishing and non-book people, when I say that, they always ask, they're like, wait, like erotica? And I'm like, no. Adults, like non-children's books.
Yeah, not that kind of adult.
But it is an anti-Eat, Pray, Love story. So classic Eat, Pray, Love is a white woman goes to Europe, she's like divorced or broken up or whatever, eats pasta and falls in love with a white guy, right? And like finds herself. So that's a classic Eat, Pray, Love. Mine is still a novel, it's still fiction, but largely inspired by a lot of true events. And it's an Asian girl who goes backpacking throughout South Africa, and she's following the journey of her mom's footsteps and tracing where her mom went actually during apartheid. So it definitely goes, I would like to say, deeper than a lot of traditional Eat, Pray, Love narratives. It explores neocolonialism, the privilege of backpacking, diversity in that space or lack of diversity in the travel space, a lot of the history of a country that is very, very rich and somewhat tragic. And what it's like to solo female travel and all of these different themes. There's also scuba diving. and
A lot of this
swimming with
sounds
sharks.
familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely inspired by a lot of true events, but still novel and still fiction.
Amazing. That does sound absolutely incredible. How far into this process are you?
So I am working on the, hopefully, knock on wood, what is the last revision with my agent before we go out to publishers and go out on submission with
Wow.
it.
So that's not far away.
And yeah, I mean, right now it's summer, so the publishing industry is quite quiet at the moment. If we're lucky, we'll go out on submission maybe at the end of summer. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's definitely the most personal thing I've written so far, in terms of just being rooted a lot in reality and the topic being much more serious. In hindsight, I probably should have said it in a country that was less hectic to write about.
Yeah.
A lot more, but yeah, there's just something that drew me to the bottom of the world.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for that one. It sounds great. So let's talk very quickly about your sort of backpacking travels and perhaps some of the more interesting stories. If you've got, I know you've got some. I caught one of your interviews before. So what can you tell us? Because you mentioned that sometimes it's not always good stories. Sometimes bad things happen, and of course you can talk about any of those stories. You don't have to go down the dark side, but we do quite like a bit of a dark story in the show.
Yeah.
But it's up to you.
I mean, stories are made of conflict, right?
Yeah, of
And
course.
I think it was Lavinia Spalding who said, adventures are made up of the sum of their misadventures.
Mhm.
So in the moment, misadventures suck. You're freaking out. You don't know what's going on. You're like, I'm going to die. But in hindsight, it makes for a great story. No one wants to read a story about like, oh, I had a perfectly safe flight to this really boring country and I just went there and sipped a pina colada. That's not fun to read about. So I would say I've definitely had my fair share of misadventures, but one of my favorite weird plot twists happened actually quite recently. So I was on the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica, crossing down from Nicaragua into Costa Rica. Traditionally, you don't require a visa to Costa Rica if you're a US resident, which I am. But unluckily, my resident card had expired and I have what's known as like a green card stamp in your passport, which they did not accept. So
Wow.
I got split from my partner on the border, got deported back into Nicaragua. This is middle of COVID times, by the way. My partner could no longer cross back into Nicaragua because he required a new PCR test. I'm stuck on the border. It's getting dark. It's like 5 p.m. The light is starting to fade. I'm by myself. I have none of my belongings because they're with my partner across the border. And I end up getting taken by these two travelers, these older travelers who are crossing from Costa Rica into Nicaragua. They were just crossing the border at the time. Ask them if we can hitch a ride just to the closest city and I can figure it out from there. And they turned out to have a house on the beach side. They were like, just come stay at our house for a night. You're kind of our daughter's age. We don't want you to leave you alone. Just come stay with us, get your bearings. So I said, okay, assuming it was just this like normal house. We show up and it's a mansion on the Nicaraguan coastline. Just like they just had a house, these guys. And eventually two of our friends in Nicaragua joined us there, they're this Indian couple who's van lifing it down the Americas in a van, which is really cool. They joined up, and then my partner crossed back and we all met up there, and we had 3-4 days of just hanging out with the loveliest couple who are now dear friends. Wow. Cooking, having our first American Super Bowl experience, watching the Super Bowl there, like doing just like making new friends. And it was a complete misadventure and terrible in the moment because if anyone who's done a border crossing knows they're very stressful. There's a lot of like anti-immigration stuff going on. A lot of like, it's also no one there spoke English. It was all like Spanish. So I was speaking very broken Spanish, but it ended up being one of my favorite misadventure stories that I've ever encountered.
That is incredible. And the fact that it was in the middle of lockdown, COVID must have been
COVID
really
did not
extra
help
tension.
Things.
Wow.
So I missed out on Costa Rica and I still haven't gotten to go back, but it was just one of those moments that serendipitous these people were crossing through. And I've had other stories where, I was in South Africa and this was on my first backpacking journey, was looking for a way to walk into town. And some guy at the hostel I was staying at was like, yeah, it can get pretty shady at night. Let me walk you. he was roughly my age. Turned out he was an American aid worker who was working in, I believe, South Sudan at that point, and was just in South Africa. I was traveling up the same part that I was, in a bright blue combi that literally looked like it was from Instagram, and I ended up hitching a ride with him up the coastline. He taught me how to surf. We went bungee jumping. Like, just I made a really, really good new friend.
Yeah. Do you ever get kind of intimidated by the people you meet then when you're on these adventures, or are you quite confident in the fact that, I don't know, that you attract the right people? I'm not sure I'd be that trusting.
It definitely, I would say it takes time to hone your spidey senses on who is trustworthy and not, especially as a woman. There are just certain things you have to be aware of, right? But you generally get a pretty good sense after a conversation. Like, I would not like stand on the edge of the street and hitchhike per se, like that in a country like South Africa. But if you meet someone at a hostel or a backpacker's lodge or in some other way, and you hang out with them for like a day, you kind of get a vibe of whether this person, you know, can you can trust them or not. And yeah, it just takes time to hone those skills, I guess.
Well, hopefully you can keep on with those good calls, because
you
could have gone to that,
safe and be aware. Like,
you could have gone to that house and that house be an absolute mess and just be like a weird little, I don't know, it could have been a lot different to that.
But after you just learn to try that. There's also certain markers, right? If when I say, oh, I'm from, you know, blah blah blah, I went to school here, I lived in the city, and they're like, oh, I know this thing, I know, it just, you kind of get a sense of who's who. But also, I tend to operate in the sense that most people in the world are good people, and if not, then I carry pepper spray.
Love it.
So I've never had to use it yet, but it is there.
Is it? Do you watch The Walking Dead? Have you ever watched that?
Yes, I love zombie movies and shows.
Yeah, they used to have a saying whenever they met someone new, they'd ask them a set of questions about how many have you killed, have you done this and this. Do you have a set of questions you ask people?
I generally, it's not maybe a set of questions per se, and the classic traveler question is, first it's like, oh, where are you from? And then it's, how long have you been traveling? How long are you here for? And then maybe on day 3, you're like, wait, so what was your name again? But I definitely, I ask where the person's from. It's always illuminating, you know, how long they're traveling, why are they here? What have they been doing? And you just get a sense for someone.
Brilliant.
And most people on the road too, maybe not the locals, but the travelers, there's a certain openness that we operate in. Like, if you open your heart to experiences and adventures, you'll kind of gravitate and find the right people.
Incredible. Amazing. So let's get on with part 3 of the show. We've got just over 10-ish minutes left, and we want to get some questions from you guys. So if you do have questions, please send them in for myself or Pia or both of us, and we'll get to those. And I've got some off the cuff questions to ask now as well. So let's get on with part 3, which is community questions. So then, to start us off, I've got some weird ones I found online actually for tonight's show, just a couple, and I want to see test your knowledge a little bit here. And it's it may be wrong, but we'll see. So the first one is Booking.com. They did a little survey, and their research found out that what is the #1 international destination for solo travel?
Oh, interesting.
I mean, again,
travel.
This is what they're saying it is. Yeah. So solo travel, which would be the #1 international destination?
I know that Bangkok is one of the top destinations for just international travel, period. I think it was actually the #1 city for international travel, but I don't know if it's the first for solo. Is it Paris?
It's not Paris. It's more, I'd say it's warmer.
London?
It's definitely warmer than Paris and London.
Okay.
Yes.
Warmer than Paris and London. So it's not Mexico, is it? I feel like a lot of Americans are scared to go to Mexico by themselves.
Okay. Have we got any answers in the chat for that one? Let's have a little look. No, that's a question. Okay. There are lots of animals and on land and in the water where this place is.
Online, I mean, Thailand is definitely one of them,
Not Thailand.
but warm. Is there a continent you could give me?
No, because I'm horrendous at geography.
Oh, I feel like people should also try to guess. This is so much fun. Like there's animals on land and in the
Yeah.
water.
I'll give you more clues in a minute, but don't ask me to do geography clues because you won't get them. Brazil, says Brandon. Not Brazil.
I feel like Brazil's a good one. There's definitely animals in the water. Belize is animal. Philippines, Australia, New Zealand.
We've had the
No,
buzzword.
New Zealand's not warm.
It is indeed Australia. So well done, Linda, and well
Oh,
done.
it
Pierre.
is Australia.
Yes, it was Australia.
Well done, Linda.
Yeah, I didn't reveal that answer when she said that because it was the correct one. Yeah, so apparently it's Australia according to Booking.com, but they also have a few other things they mentioned, and they said about 85% of those travelers generally are what?
Are young people looking for a fun time?
They probably are, and in fact, I would say no to that based on the next question, but you're close, and I'm sure they are looking for a good time and having fun.
Well, because I know Australia allows, I think if you're under a certain age, you're allowed to go there for like a working holiday visa.
It's not young people.
Are they Americans? I don't know.
No, are we giving up on this one?
I'm so curious. 85% are.
Is that an answer that's come in? Let's have a little look.
Linda said seniors.
No, you're kind of off the ballpark a little bit with this one. It's not about the age.
Is it about the gender?
It is.
It is? Are they women?
They are women, apparently, yes.
Oh my goodness.
So apparently 85% of those travelers, solo travelers, are women. And clients are usually around what years old, or how many years old?
Like
and
18 to 25.
This is kind of between 6 years. So if you can guess the year within those 6 years, I will give you the win for that one.
Oh, okay. I would say early 20s is my estimate, but
anyone in the chat got an answer for that one? It's not 20s, and 20s is vague, so you'll have to give a year. I think that's cheated.
It's not 20s.
No, it's not the 20s.
Is it their teens? Are they younger or
they're not younger? Again,
they're older.
According to Booking.com. Yeah.
Oh wow, solo travel 40, 45.
I'll give you 45 because you're in between. It's 41 to 47 years old.
Wow.
Again, don't take my word for it or Booking.com's, but this is what they're saying.
You know what? Ageism is a very real thing in the travel space, and people only talk about the young backpackers. But when you go, you meet a lot of older people on the road too, and a lot of older people on the road for longer. They're like van lifing it as life. Or I've met people who are sailing around the world, like an old couple who just literally build a sailboat and go place to place. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that's interesting, and my perception wouldn't have gone with those suggestions in the first place. I would have suggested young people. Yeah, interesting. And I know they talk about sort of motorcyclists, and they're generally in their 40s, and I guess it's one of those things that people.
I've met. I mean, I love this because now I have something to really look forward to at 41 to 47.
Yeah.
And two is that I've met a lot of crazy travelers on my trips. So a few of them being two guys who are motorcycling it down from Switzerland down to Cape Town in South Africa. Another couple another person who was like doing the same journey, literally like in a car. And then a friend of mine actually that I met through the travel space walked from Cape Town to Cairo.
Wow.
He's a really crazy explorer. He's like trying to challenge the notion of what an explorer can look like because he's a Black man. And so he walked all the way from Cape Town to Cairo over the course of, I believe it was 2.5 years.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm gobsmacked. Right. We'll get some questions in because this is just flying by. What's the best food you've eaten while on your travels, and what was the worst? That's from Linda. Thank you for that.
Ooh, best love street food. I think it is,
Mm.
and I'm biased because I'm from Thailand, but street food is the universal democratizer, right? You don't have to be rich to eat it. It's everywhere. It's amazing because normally those stalls have been doing the same dish for generations, so they perfected their craft. Definitely biased, but I think Bangkok is one of the best food cities in the world. Also, Morocco for me was really incredible. The spices there, the tagines, what they use is just very different from where I grew up. Japan is just definitely deserves a mention up there in terms of food. And then I really love a good South African braai, which is their version of a barbecue.
Yeah.
But it's just the techniques they use, the kind of different things that they do. Also have a friend down there who is a master forager. So we go free diving, collect mussels, collect like ali croakel, different kinds, go spearfishing, come out, and then she cooks it all like in like with kelp. Like she takes a kelp bulb, like seaweed, and stuffs it with food and then roasts it over the fire. So there's different kinds of, I love food. It's like family is also in food. So it's a big, big part of travel. I think a really good way to experience the culture and to be a connective tissue, no matter where we're from in the world, we all eat, right? And it's a communal experience.
Amazing.
In terms of worst foods in the world, there have definitely been a few. I was not able to actually stomach rotten shark in Iceland. It's a delicacy there that they have where they take a kind
rotten
of shark. Yeah, it's fermented essentially. It's like they bury it, then hang it up, or the other way around. I forget, for a couple months, and it allows it to become non-toxic. And they serve it in these little cubes, and it's extremely pungent. And I will try anything once. I will literally I'll do it. That was one of the few things I was not able to eat. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
I think I'm a celebrity. I think you need to get on that show because I think you do well at those eating challenges.
I'm
I
just very
certainly would not.
experimental.
Yeah, not for rotten shark in the comments there. No chance. That's crazy. I know a few South Africans, and I know the term braai, and they used to love biltong. Bring us that all the time.
Biltong, so good. Yeah, they have, but they also have a lot of strange food down there. Like it's not as common, but a smiley is like a sheep's head that's been fried, and it's a whole head.
Yeah,
and it's a smiley because when it starts cooking, the skin pulls back from the teeth. There's stuff like that. There's like mopani worms in Namibia. There's all these. So I will try anything once. But yeah, rotten shark was a no-go, unfortunately.
They showed me once a loaf of bread, a proper one, pulled all the middle out of the bread, filled it with chips and gravy, and then it was like a bowl of chips and gravy in a loaf of bread, and it was incredible. Okay, let me move on because we've got some questions in here we need to deal with. Okay, what was the last book or film that you read or watched?
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say we went with the book already, so you can do another book if you like. But I'm
reading Bell Hooks right now. Her book All About Love, and loving it so far. And I have not finished it yet. I recently read An Ordinary Age by, I can't pronounce her name. It's new young author, and it's all about basically the pressure to be extraordinary in the current world and how I think everyone feels this way. Maybe kind of like in a world of performative nature, in a world of social media where everyone is posting their highlight reels, maybe the moments that are the most meaningful are actually the quieter ones that we don't always celebrate. And you don't have to live an extraordinary life to live a meaningful life, and oftentimes these extraordinary lives are not as extraordinary as they seem. So it really spoke to me, and the kind of the pressure, the capitalist pressure we now feel. The most recent movie, I actually recently rewatched two films that are old favorites. I rewatched Dead Poet Society and District 9.
District 9 is amazing.
So good. And as someone who spent more time in South Africa now, rewatching that, I was like, this is so good, but so triggering. And Dead Poet Society, because I'm a huge lover of the romantics, like capital R romantics, like Keats and Byron and Shelley and all those guys, those emo poets back in the day. So it really, really spoke to me.
Wow, incredible. And spit this out. I absolutely love zombie films as well, and I don't know if you know, but World War Z was my favorite book.
Oh, I literally was about to ask. It's on the shelf here somewhere. It is by far one of my favorite books ever written. Like the book, not the movie.
So do you know that on my birthday this year, in January, I started season 8. My guest on that day was Max Brooks.
I did hear about when you emailed.
Oh my God!
Max Brooks, is it the Max Brooks? Like
the
World
Max
War
Brooks?
Z Max Brooks?
Yes, that one.
Oh my
and
goodness!
He is an incredible person. Did not disappoint. Anyway, so let me ask you: if you could take any character from the world of fiction and put that character in fact, let's not put it into your book. If you could take a fictional character from TV, film, or literature and take that character on a backpacking adventure, which character are you taking with you?
That is such a good question. Oh my goodness. They're the female, like the female explorers would love that, but I almost wonder, I don't know if anyone here has seen the movie Treasure Planet as a kid or as an adult. It's this Disney film that came out, and the main character, who's voiced by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Jim Hawkins, was basically like, I wanted him as my best friend. He's a space skater kid who just dreams of a bigger world and is always like thinking of what else is out there and kind of a rebel. And so, yeah, definitely would have loved to go on an adventure with him. I tend to gravitate towards a lot of these misfit outcast characters who are dreaming of better worlds.
Brilliant answer. And if you could change the ending to any film, TV, literature, what ending are you changing and why? It doesn't have to be for bad reasons.
So there was this trilogy of books that I read as a kid called the Bartimaeus Trilogy by Jonathan Stroud, one of my favorite children's books ever written. And they completely broke my heart because it was the first book I experienced where the main character dies, and dies not in a way where you know they're going to die. They just die. And I was weeping as a 12 or 13-year-old, was just crying, bawling my eyes out. And back then was like, I'm so upset. Why did this happen? It needs to da 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 da. But now looking back at it, you know, that was his journey. It was heartbreaking, but it's the bittersweetness that made me fall in love with books, right? And it's the hero or maybe the anti-hero's journey, because he was an anti-hero. So while a part of me always wanted to change that ending, and I still kind of do, but it was so beautiful that it wasn't a happy ending, I think, because it felt a lot more like life. So yeah, that's kind of like a half answer for the one that I wanted to, but hopefully.
So I'm assuming you would change that to keep the character alive, right?
Yes, back then, yes, but almost now it's like the bittersweetness is what made it so memorable. Like to this day, that I can still feel that pain, and it's that feeling that I have lived with. Like, you know, recently watched the final season of Peaky Blinders, and no spoilers, but the same thing. You have like an anti-hero and you're like, are they going to live or die? And does it feel good if they like? So I really like those.
I haven't watched it yet. That's one of the many things on my list, and I've started and I have to put on the back shelf because I'm watching too many other things. Okay, we've just gone over the hour, so I do apologize. But final question for me. If you are looking back on your life many years down the line, what would success be for you? What would be, and not necessarily success in the writing world, and obviously you've got a lot of different things in your life, but what would you be satisfied with achieving?
Yeah. You know, I feel like success is this like ephemeral concept that is very malleable depending who you're talking to, right? There's the classic definition that the money, happiness, family, good career, good job. But I think a lot of that, especially happiness, when people say, oh, success is happiness, it's not a constant state of being. No one can possibly be happy 24/7 all the time. And I think when you're a writer, you're actually constantly looking forward with imagination, or you're looking back with nostalgia, and you're writing to live life again in retrospect. And I think that sometimes that's why a lot of writers are sad, or maybe a lot of sad people write for that matter. But I'm trying to personally learn how to be more content with the precise moment. So it sounds very hippy dippy. It sounds like I grew up Buddhist, but I definitely am not a practicing Buddhist. But it's just more about living in the now. And instead of always looking forward or backwards in life, actually just living. It reminds me of, you know, romantic literature like John Keats and negative capability and the idea of accepting uncertainties. And I think it just takes like recalibrating your brain to recognize that there's a balance between curiosity of the future and wanting to know and like experiencing all these things, and being happy in the present moment and trusting that you may not actually end up where you thought you'd be, but you're always going to end up where you're supposed to go. And to be like happy with that, I think is success. I don't know if that is like a very long-winded answer.
Not at all. I think that's wonderful. And it's something I've tried to make myself aware of recently. And when I released my books and this show has had milestones, it took someone talking to me to realize that I didn't stop and celebrate any of that. And it's living in the moment and appreciating what you're doing on that journey. If you're a self-published author or if you're an established author or if you whatever you're doing, I think is a very important thing to try and become aware of.
Exactly. And the arrival fallacy, you know, we always, Alain de Botton, who's like the School of Life guys, one of my favorite like modern philosophers, he talks about this arrival fallacy. We always say that we want to get to that next point and we'll be happy. And for a lot of us, that next point is publishing a book. I'm sure it's like writing that new thing, writing that book, whatever, publishing it. Once you do, and it's speaking as someone who has published a book before, the ballpark just keeps moving. It'll constantly keep moving.
Amazing. It's very true. Okay, so just before we finish off, can you let people know where they can find out more information about you and kind of where you hang out socially?
Yeah, so my website is piernirandara.com. I'm mostly on Instagram, actually, not Twitter. Pier is Great Perhaps is my Instagram. And yeah, I post most of the updates there and a lot of just like photography, writing journey, all those good things. For professional inquiries, I'm repped at Jane Chloe Nesbitt. And yeah, would love to chat more and hear people's stories. And if anyone happens to go diving or have adventures to share, always love to hear those.
Incredible. Yeah, of course, I'll leave links to this in the description, guys, to Pier's website and all those things. Please do go and check it out because those photographs are incredible. I really do mean that. And I'm sure there are so many more adventures that we haven't talked about, but I would love to keep talking, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. Again, guys, the Indie Takeover, get on the website and check that out today or tomorrow and support our winning author throughout this month. And I will be buying that book and reviewing it. So I hope you can do too, and we can really give that person a boost. Pier, thank you so much for joining me. I've absolutely loved chatting to you. And of course, the show's been a bit of a mess in terms of its structure. And that's just testament to how much I was listening to you and not concentrating on what I was doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. This is amazing. And thank you for everyone who chimed in with all their questions and funny comments and loved it.
Not a problem at all. Thank you so much, guys. Please look after yourselves and we will see you very soon. From us, it's goodbye. Thank you, guys.